The flashing red and blues in the rearview mirror were supposed to be a routine traffic stop. Instead, a power-tripping local cop just threw handcuffs on the wrong man. He thought he bagged an easy target. 5 minutes later, 20 armored federal SUVs would show him exactly who he crossed. The late August sun was beating down on the cracked asphalt of Route 1019, casting long, wavering heat mirages across the empty two-lane highway. Officer Bradley Harrison sat in the driver's seat of his idling Ford Police Interceptor, the AC blasting, his mirrored aviators reflecting the desolate stretch of road just outside the affluent suburb of Oakhaven. Harrison had been on the local force for 9 years, a tenure that had afforded him a dangerous amount of complacency and a heavily inflated sense of his own authority. He was the law in this zip code, a big fish in a predictably quiet, manicured pond. Beside him sat Colin Hayes, a rookie barely 3 months out of the academy, nervously adjusting his duty belt. "Quiet day, Brad," Colin mumbled, trying to fill the heavy silence in the cruiser. Harrison scoffed, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel. "Quiet just means they're hiding, kid. You gotta know how to look. You gotta have a nose for the ones who don't belong here." 2 miles down that sane, blistering highway, David Miller was navigating a rusted, beat-up 2008 Chevy Impala with a rattling muffler. David's pulse was a steady, rhythmic thud in his ears. To anyone passing by, he looked like a weary, blue-collar worker heading home after a grueling double shift. He wore a faded denim jacket, a plain gray t-shirt, and a battered baseball cap pulled low. But beneath the worn exterior was 14 months of agonizing, high-stakes undercover work. David wasn't a local. He was a senior special agent with the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. Woven into the lining of his jacket was a state-of-the-art microscopic wire, broadcasting a live feed to a mobile command center parked in an abandoned strip mall 3 towns over. In exactly 22 minutes, David was scheduled to meet with Hector Ramirez, a brutal mid-level distributor for the Sinaloa cartel, to purchase 40 kilos of uncut fentanyl. It was the linchpin of Operation Iron Clasper Sting, designed to trace the supply chain straight back to the border. David checked his rearview mirror. The drop location, an abandoned lumber yard, was approaching fast. He eased off the gas, maintaining exactly 3 miles under the speed limit. Back in the cruiser, Harrison's eyes locked onto the Impala as it rumbled past their hidden turnout. The vehicle was an eyesore, a rusted blight on Oakhaven's pristine roads. Harrison ran the plates through his dash-mounted computer. Registered to Jerome Hayes, no outstanding warrants. Clean. But Harrison didn't care about the screen. He saw a battered car, and he saw the driver, a black man who, in Harrison's prejudiced calculus, didn't fit the demographic of the gated communities nearby. "Watch this, Colin." Harrison smirked, shifting the cruiser into drive and slamming his foot on the gas. Textbook proactive policing. The Interceptor surged onto the highway, tires screaming, closing the distance to the Impala in seconds. Harrison flipped the toggle switch. The sirens wailed, slicing through the quiet afternoon, and the light bar erupted in blinding red and blue. David cursed under his breath as the lights flooded his cabin. "Command, this is Ghost," he muttered quietly, his lips barely moving. "I'm getting lit up by local PD on Route 119, mile marker 4. You seeing this?" A mile away in the mobile command center, Supervisory Special Agent Sarah Jenkins stared at the GPS tracker, blinking on her monitor. "Copy that, Ghost. We see him. Do not break cover unless absolutely necessary. We are 20 minutes from the Ramirez meet. Can you talk your way out of it?" "I'll handle it," David whispered, guiding the Impala to the dusty shoulder. He shifted into park, rolled down his window, and placed both hands firmly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. He knew the drill. Keep calm, be polite, get the ticket, and move on. The mission was too important. Harrison stepped out of the cruiser, adjusting his duty belt with a theatrical swagger. He took his time walking up to the Impala, deliberately placing his hand over the butt of his sidearm. He stopped just behind the driver's side pillar, leaning in close enough for David to smell the stale coffee and peppermint gum on his breath. License, registration, and proof of insurance, Harrison barked, his voice dripping with condescension. And keep your hands where I can see them. Afternoon, officer, David said, keeping his voice level and respectful. He slowly reached into his glove compartment and handed over the forged documents provided by the Bureau. Was I speeding? I was keeping my eyes on the dash. Harrison snatched the papers, barely glancing at them. You crossed the solid white line back there by about 6 inches. That's a failure to maintain a lane. Where are you heading in such a hurry, Jerome? Just heading home from work, sir. Long day. Ha! Harrison sneered, leaning in further. Address here says you live in Westside. You're a long way from home. What brings you to Oakhaven? Took a detour to avoid the interstate traffic, David replied smoothly. Look, officer, if I drifted, I apologize. I'm just trying to get on my way. Harrison didn't like the calm in David's voice. He expected nervousness, stuttering fear. The lack of intimidation bruised his fragile ego. Step out of the vehicle, Harrison commanded, stepping back and unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. Command, David whispered the microphone, catching the subtle vibration of his throat. Local wants me out of the car, escaping the timeline. I need a fix now. David, hold your ground, Jenkins' voice crackled in his earpiece. If you miss the Ramirez meet, the cartel goes underground. 14 months of work burns today. Try to de-escalate. Officer, David said, turning his head slightly. I've provided my information. If you're going to write a citation, please write it. I am in a significant rush. I didn't ask for your schedule. Harrison shouted, his face reddening. I gave you a lawful order. Step out of the vehicle now, or I will drag you out through this window. Rookie Colin Hayes had approached the passenger side, his hand resting nervously on his taser. Brad, the plates are clean, Colin said softly. Maybe we just write the warning and— What? Shut up, Colin. Colin. He grabbed the door handle of the Impala and yanked it open. Out. Now. David took a slow, deep breath, calculating his options. Fighting the officer would blow his cover instantly and result in a media spectacle that would alert Ramirez. Complying was the only option, that it was burning precious minutes. He slowly swung his legs out of the car and stood up. He was a few inches taller than Harrison, heavily muscled beneath the baggy clothing, a physical presence that immediately made the arrogant cop take a defensive half-step back. Turn around. Put your hands on the roof of the car, Harrison ordered, his voice pitching up an octave. David complied, placing his palms flat against the sun-baked metal of the Impala. Ooh, officer. I strongly advise you to run my name through NCIC and call your watch commander. You are stepping into something you do not understand. Is that a threat? Harrison growled, grabbing David's left arm and twisting it painfully behind his back. It's a fact, David replied through gritted teeth. Harrison kicked David's legs apart and began an aggressive pat-down. When his hand brushed the small of David's back, he felt the hard, unmistakable shape of a Glock 19 tucked concealed inside the waistband holster. Gun! He's got a weapon, Harrison yelled, drawing his own firearm and pressing the barrel into the back of David's neck. Nurse to move a muscle, or I swear to God I will blow your head off." Cullen drew his weapon, his hands shaking violently. "Brad, be careful. Disarm him, Colin. Get the gun." Harrison barked. The rookie rushed forward, clumsily pulling the Glock from David's waistband. "Is registered," David said coldly, the heat of the pavement radiating against his legs, the cold steel of Harrison's gun digging into his spine. "Permit is in my left breast pocket. Again, run the name. Call your boss." Harrison didn't care about a permit. In his mind, he had just caught an armed thug infiltrating his wealthy town. Adrenaline and arrogance flooded his system. He holstered his weapon, grabbed his handcuffs, and violently ratcheted them onto David's wrists, tightening the metal until it bit deeply into the skin. "You have the right to remain silent," Harrison sneered, shoving David hard against the side of the police cruiser. "I highly suggest you use it. You're going away for a long time, buddy." In the command center, the audio feed was chaotic. Sarah Jenkins slammed her fist on the console. "Damn it! He's in cuffs. Ramirez is going to be at the lumberyard in 12 minutes. If Ghost isn't there, Ramirez ghosts us." Director Thomas Wright, a stern man with 30 years of federal law enforcement under his belt, stepped up behind Jenkins, his face a mask of cold fury. He had personally authorized David's decover operation. He knew the sacrifices Miller had made, missing his daughter's birthdays, living in squalor, risking his life daily. And now, a jumped-up local traffic cop was about to torpedo a multi-agency federal sting. "Who is the detaining officer?" Watt demanded. Jenkins rapidly typed on her keyboard, pulling up the GPS coordinates and cross-referencing Oak Haven PD's dispatch logs. "Tar 42, Officer Bradley Harrison. History of excessive force complaints but nothing that stuck. He's a local hothead. Talk, contact Oak Haven PD's chief of police," Wright ordered. "Tell him his guy just detained an undercover federal agent and is interfering with an active Title III federal wiretap operation." Jenkins dialed the number, but her face fell after a few seconds. "Director, Oak Haven PD Dispatch says the chief is out of pocket at a city council meeting. The watch commander is refusing to patch me through on radio without a warrant number. They think it's a prank call." Wright's jaw tightened. The bureaucracy of small-town police departments was a luxury they couldn't afford. The clock was ticking down. If Ramirez arrived at the meet and found no buyer, he would assume a trap, burn his phones, and vanish to Mexico. "Enough of this," Wright said, his voice dropping to a dangerous icy baritone. "Jenkins, scramble the QRF." Jenkins blinked. "Director, the quick reaction force is 50 men. If we roll them, we blow the entire perimeter. Ramirez might see the convoy. If we don't roll them, our agent goes to county lockup and the cartel walks anyway," she crudite countered. "Create the tactical teams to converge on Route 119. I want an absolute overwhelming show of force. We are taking our agent back, and we are going to educate Officer Harrison on federal jurisdiction. Go." Back on the side of the highway, Harrison was practically vibrating with smug satisfaction. He forcefully shoved David into the cramped back seat of the Interceptor. The heavy plastic partition separated them, but David could clearly see Harrison grinning at his rookie partner in the front. "Textbook, Colin," Harrison gloated, tossing David's Glock onto the dashboard like a trophy. "Concealed weapon, erratic driving, resisting arrest. The DA is going to love this." "He didn't really resist, Brad," Colin whispered, looking back at David with a mixture of guilt and anxiety. "And the gun might actually be registered. We really need to run the NCIC check. I'll run it at the station after I let him sweat in holding for a few hours." Harrison laughed, putting the cruiser in gear. In the back seat, David leaned his head against the reinforced glass. The handcuffs were cutting off his circulation, but physical pain was secondary to the crushing realization that the op was falling apart. He looked at the digital clock on the cruiser's dash. 2006 p.m. Ramirez was going to be at the yard at 2015. "Hey, hotshot," Harrison called back through the grated partition, looking at David in the rearview mirror. "You're awfully quiet back there, thinking about how much time you're gonna serve." David locked eyes with the arrogant cop in the mirror. All pretense of the Jerome Hayes persona melted away. His posture straightened, his voice losing the weary tone of a blue-collar worker and adopting the precise authoritative cadence of a federal agent. "Officer Harrison," David said, his voice cutting through the hum of the cruiser's AC. "My name is Special Agent David Miller, Federal Bureau of Investigation. You have unlawfully detained me, you have stolen my federally issued sidearm, and you are currently obstructing an ongoing, highly classified federal narcotics investigation." Harrison laughed, a loud barking sound. "Oh, that's rich. Now you're a Fed. What's next? You're the President of the United States. Save the delusions for the psychoval, buddy. Look at your dashboard, Bradley," David continued, completely unfazed. "Look at my weapon. You didn't check it, did you? It's not a standard civilian Glock 19. Look at the serial number. Look at the government property stamp on the slide." Colin, sitting in the passenger seat, slowly reached out and picked up the weapon. He turned it over in his hands. The blood drained from the rookie's face as his eyes locked onto the small, laser-engraved insignia near the rear sight. "Brad." Colin's voice cracked. "Brad, he's telling the truth. It says, property of U.S. Goofed, FBI. Harrison snatched the gun from Colin's hands, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second, before his ego slammed the door on logic. "It's a fake. You can buy these parts online." "Nice try, Agent, but you're not getting out of this." "I don't need to get out of it," David said softly, leaning back against the hard plastic seat. "They are coming to get me." Suddenly, the police radio on Harrison's dashboard crackled to life, but it wasn't the familiar, bored voice of the Oak Haven dispatcher. The signal was hijacked, overwhelmed by a powerful, encrypted frequency. A booming, authoritative voice echoed through the cruiser. "Oak Haven Police Unit 4-2, this is FBI Command Actual. Pull your vehicle over immediately and step outside with your hands visible. You are currently in possession of a federal agent." Harrison slammed on the brakes, the cruiser skidding slightly before coming to a halt on the shoulder. He stared at the radio, his mouth suddenly dry. What kind of trick is this?" Before Colin could answer, a low, mechanical rumble began to vibrate through the floorboards of the police cruiser. It wasn't one engine, it was dozens. Harrison looked up into his rearview mirror, his breath caught in his throat. Emerging from the heat distortion on the highway behind them, moving at over 80 miles an hour in perfect synchronized formation, was a massive convoy. Matty black, armored Chevy Suburbans and Ford Excursions, their grilles equipped with heavy steel push bumpers, were bearing down on them. There were no sirens, just a terrifying coordinated silence, broken only by the roar of heavy engines. "Brad," Colin squeaked, pressing himself back into his seat. "What is that?" I don't know," Harrison stammered, his earlier arrogance evaporating into a cold, paralyzing dread. The first two black SUVs rocketed past the cruiser, violently cutting off the road ahead and slamming on their brakes, sending up clouds of white smoke. Two more boxed the cruiser in from the rear. Within 10 seconds, 20 federal vehicles had completely surrounded the lone Oak Haven police car, a suffocating ring of black steel and tinted glass. The doors of the SUVs flew open in unison, heavily armed operators wearing olive-drab tactical gear, Kevlar helmets, and plates emblazoned with massive yellow FBI lettering poured out. Assault rifles were raised, laser sights painting the interior of Harrison's cruiser with dozens of dancing red dots. Through the chaos, a massive tactical command vehicle pulled up directly alongside the driver's side window. The side door slid open, revealing Director Thomas Wright, his face like thunder. He held a megaphone to his mouth. "Officer Bradley Harrison," Wright's voice boomed, shaking the glass of the police car. "Turn off your engine. Place your hands out the window. If you make a single sudden movement, my men will treat you as a hostile threat to a federal agent. Do it now." Harrison sat frozen, the red dots of 20 rifles resting squarely on his chest. The sleepy, quiet afternoon in Oak Haven had just turned into his worst nightmare. The silence that followed Director Wright's command was deafening. Inside the cruiser, Officer Bradley Harrison was hyperventilating, his chest heaving against the ballistic vest that suddenly felt paper-thin. The 20-plus laser sights danced across his torso and face like a swarm of angry, glowing hornets. Rookie Colin Hayes didn't hesitate. Sobbing quietly, the young officer threw his door open, dropped to his knees on the scalding asphalt, and laced his fingers behind his head. "I'm sorry. I told him." "I didn't want to do it," Colin screamed, his voice cracking in absolute terror. 2 heavily armored FBI SWAT operators moved in with practiced, ruthless efficiency, securing the rookie without a word. Harrison, however, was paralyzed. The reality of his colossal mistake had short-circuited his brain. He had spent a decade bullying teenagers and harassing out-of-towners, secure in the bubble of his local badge. Now the full, crushing weight of the United States federal government was parked on his windshield. "Officer Harrison, I will not ask again." Wright's voice roared through the megaphone. "Step out of the vehicle and keep your hands empty, or my operators will neutralize the threat." Trembling violently, Harrison reached for the door handle. It took him 3 tries to grasp it. As he pushed the door open, his legs gave out. He stumbled onto the shoulder of the highway, raising his empty hands toward the unforgiving midday sun. Face down, on the ground. Now, Harrison dropped to the dirt. Before he could even brace himself, a boot pressed firmly between his shoulder blades. His arms were wrenched behind his back with a force that made his rotator cuffs scream. The cold, heavy steel of federal handcuffs ratcheted shut around his wrists. It was a brutal mirror of what he had done to David just 5 minutes prior. Director Wright ignored the whimpering cop on the ground and strode directly to the rear door of the interceptor. He yanked it open. "Agent Miller," Wright said, his stern expression softening for just a fraction of a second. He pulled a universal cuff key from his pocket and quickly unlocked the tight metal rings biting into David's wrists. David rubbed his bruised skin, stepping out of the stifling cruiser. He didn't look shaken. He looked furious. He immediately checked the glowing green digits on his tactical watch. It was 2:11 p.m. "Sir, we have exactly 4 minutes, David said, his voice clipped and professional, completely ignoring Harrison, who was currently being hoisted to his feet by 2 massive SWAT operators. "Key Ramirez is pulling into the lumber yard now. If the perimeter is blown, the perimeter is secure." The QRF approached from the north. "Ramirez is coming from the south," Wright interrupted, tossing David a set of keys. "We brought a clean, unmarked Dodge Charger. It's parked behind the command vehicle. Get moving. Jenkins will guide you in. We will clean up this mess." David nodded, broke into a sprint toward the sleek black Charger, and peeled at the blockade. He had a cartel distributor to catch. Back on the highway, Harrison was shoved against the hood of an armored Suburban. The scorching metal burned his cheek, but the humiliation burned hotter. He watched the rusted Chevy Impala he had pulled over being secured by federal agents, while his own police cruiser was being searched. Director Wright stepped directly into Harrison's line of sight, his face a mask of absolute disdain. "Do you know what you've done today, Bradley?" Wright asked, his voice deathly quiet. I was just doing my job," Harrison stammered, tears of panic streaming down his face. "You look suspicious." He fit the profile. "I have qualified immunity." "Qualified immunity does not cover the kidnapping of a federal agent and the willful obstruction of a Title III federal wiretap," Wright said, leaning in so close Harrison could see the gray in his stubble. "Your little power trip almost cost us a 14-month operation against the Sinaloa cartel. You are being placed under federal arrest for violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 1111 assaulting, resisting or impeding certain officers or employees. Add in deprivation of rights under color of law." "My chief, you need to call Chief Henderson," Harrison cried, desperation clawing at his throat. "Who clear this up? He knows me." "We did call your chief," Wright replied coldly. "Once he realized you detained one of my deep cover operatives, he immediately suspended you without pay pending termination. You don't have a chief anymore, Bradley. You don't have a badge. You are a federal suspect. Get him out of my sight." The agents forcefully shoved Harrison into the back of a dark transport van. As the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing him in darkness, the sheer gravity of his ruined life finally crushed him. He wept openly, the sound muffled by the thick steel of the federal vehicle. 3 miles away, the dust was settling at the abandoned lumberyard. Hector Ramirez, a notoriously paranoid cartel lieutenant, sat in his idling Cadillac Escalade, nervously checking his Rolex. It was 2:16 p.m. His hand rested on the gold-plated 1911 pistol in his lap. He was just about to shift the SUV into drive and vanish when a black Dodge Charger roared into the dirt lot, sliding to a halt in a cloud of gravel. David stepped out, projecting absolute calm. He walked to the driver's side window of the Cadillac. "You're late," Ramirez growled, his eyes darting around the empty lot. "I don't like late. Local cops," David lied smoothly, leaning against the door frame. "Had a speed trap set up on 110. Had to take the back roads to avoid them seeing the cash. You want the money, or do you want to complain about my driving?" "Ugh." Pite. Ramirez studied David's face for a long, tense moment. The story checked out. Local cops were always looking to fill their quota at the end of the month. The cartel lieutenant nodded, relaxing his grip on the gun. "Show me." David opened the trunk of the Charger, revealing 2 heavy duffel bags packed with marked federal bills. Ramirez signaled his men to bring out the product. As soon as the trunk of the cartel vehicle opened to reveal 40 kilos of fentanyl, David subtly tapped the microphone hidden in his collar. "Target acquired. Go." Before Ramirez could even draw a breath, the lumberyard exploded into chaos. Flashbang grenades shattered the afternoon stillness, blinding white light and concussive blasts rocking the dirt lot. FBI SWAT operators materialized from the tree line and the dilapidated warehouses, descending on the cartel members like a tidal wave. Ramirez was ripped from his Escalade and pinned to the dirt before he could even reach for his gold-plated pistol. Operation Iron Clasp was a massive, flawless success. But for Bradley Harrison, the nightmare was just beginning. The fallout was swift and brutal, playing out across national news networks. The dashcam footage from Harrison's own cruiser, which clearly recorded his racist remarks, his illegal search, and his sheer arrogance, was leaked to the press. The public outcry was deafening. Oak Haven Police Department immediately terminated Harrison. The local police union, seeing the absolute PR disaster and the airtight federal indictment, publicly distanced themselves, refusing to fund his legal defense. Harrison was left utterly isolated. 6 months later, Harrison sat in a sterile wood-paneled federal courtroom in downtown Chicago. He looked nothing like the puffed-up, arrogant cop who had strutted down Route 119. He was gaunt, his posture slumped beneath a cheap, ill-fitting suit. United States Attorney Christopher Bowman delivered a devastating closing argument, painting Harrison not just as a bad cop, but as a dangerous liability who had jeopardized national security for the sake of his own fragile ego. When the Honorable Judge Richard Davies handed down the sentence, the courtroom was dead silent. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Davies said, peering over his glasses, "you were given a badge to protect the public. Instead, you used it as a weapon to terrorize those you deemed beneath you. Your arrogance endangered lives and nearly destroyed a critical federal operation. Law enforcement officers must be held to the highest standard, and you have disgraced that standard entirely." Harrison was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for deprivation of rights under color of law and obstruction of justice. Under federal law, his conviction stripped him of his law enforcement pension. The civil suit filed by the Department of Justice ensured he would be bankrupt for the rest of his life. As the U.S. Marshals placed the shackles around Harrison's ankles to transport him to FCI, Englewood, a federal correctional institution where former cops were placed in restrictive protective custody. To survive, he caught a glimpse of a man sitting quietly in the back row of the gallery. It was David Miller. David wore a sharp-tailored suit, looking every bit the seasoned federal agent he was. There was no bloating in his eyes, no smirk of triumph. He just watched with cold, clinical detachment as the system worked exactly as it was supposed to. David gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to the disgraced cop. Harrison looked away, his face pale, the heavy chains rattling as he shuffled out of the courtroom and into the abyss of his own making. The big fish from Oak Haven had finally found out there were much, much bigger predators in the water. If you loved seeing this arrogant, power-tripping cop get a massive dose of hard karma, smash that like button. Don't forget to share this incredible real-life story of justice with your friends, and hit subscribe for more intense, jaw-dropping stories where the bad guys finally get exactly what they deserve. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the FBI's epic takedown.